Hello everybody, and today we'll be looking at place value, significant figures, and decimal places. And at the end of this video, you should be able to do three things. One, you should be able to identify the value of a digit in a number depending on the place of that digit. Two, you should be able to write numbers correct to a given number of significant figures. Three, write a number to a correct number of decimal places. So let's head straight into the first topic, place value. Now the value of a digit depends on its position in that number. So let's say we have the number 2531 and we want to identify the place value of each digit in this number. So let's say the first one, let's say we want to identify the place value of 1. Now the place value of 1 would simply be 1. And the place value of 3 would simply be 30. And the place value of 5 would simply be 500. And the place value of 2 would simply be 2000. Now the place value, you can hear it in the sound when you call the number. For example, this number, 2531. And that's how you can help that can help you to determine the place value of a number. So let's look at another example. Let's say we have the number 0.235 and we want to identify the place value of each digit in this decimal. So the value of the 2, now we see the 2 now is after the decimal point, we're into the decimal part of the number. So the value of the 2 would be tenths, which would be 2 over 10. And the value of the 3 would be hundredths with the th. So the value of this 3 would be 3 over 100. And then the value of the 5, the place value of 5 would be 5 over, you guessed it, 1000. And of course, if we divide the 2 by the 10, you'll end up with 0.2, which will be the same position as how this is. And if we divide the 3 by 100, we will end up with 0.03, which is the same position as this here. And if we divide the 5 by 1000, we'll end up with 0.005, which will be the same position as the 5, the same place as the 5. And that is how we identify the place value in different numbers. So let's do one more example to cement this concept. Let's say we have the number 26.157. And we want to identify the place value of each digit in this number. So the first thing, let's identify what is the value of the 2, the place value of 2. So the place value of 2 would simply be, this is ones, this is tens, so this would simply be 20. And the place value of 6 would simply be 6. And the place value of 1 would be 1 over 10. And the place value of 5 would be 5 over 100. And the place value of 7 would simply be 7 over 1000. And that's how we identify the place value in this number, which is 26.157. Now let's move on to decimal places. So in your exam or in a test or sometimes even in real life, you will be asked to round off a number to a correct number of decimal places, to a certain amount of decimal places. And this is very simple to do. As long as you understand this concept, it's easy. You would not forget. And rounding off by decimal places would be like riding a bike. You would never forget it. So let's look at it. So we start counting when we want to round off to a certain number of decimal places. We start counting from the first number after the decimal point, or from the first number, or from the digits to the right of the decimal point. So let's say we have the digit 2.621. In this digit, we see this digit has 3 decimal places because we start counting from the first digit after the decimal point to the right of the decimal point, that is, to be specific. So this will be 1, 2, 3. So this digit has 3 decimal places. But let's just say now we were asked to round this same digit, which is 2.621, correct to 2 decimal places. Now we have to count 2 digits after the decimal point. So we count 1, 2. But we are not done there as yet. We have to look at the number, or we have to look at the digit after where we stop. So since we stop at this 2, we have to look at the next digit, which would be 1. Now we're not concerned with that 1, but that 1 plays a very important role to the next thing that we're about to do. So since we counted 2 decimal places, so we look at the digit after where we stop, which is the 1. Now if this number after the number that we stop at is 5 and more, we add 1 to the previous number. And if it's 4 or less, we leave it as it is. So this correct to 2 decimal place would be 2.62. Now let's look at some other examples. Let's say we have, the question asks us to round 82.7694 to 1 decimal place. So we see after the decimal point, we should have 1 number. So in this case, we count 1, and then we look at the number after the digit that we stop at. In this case, we see the number is 6. So of course, this 6 is 5 and more. So what do? We add 1 to the previous number. So this would be 82.8 to 1 decimal place. Let's look at another number. 3.141592. And they want us to write that correct to 3 decimal places. They want us to round it to 3 decimal places. So we need 3 numbers after the point. So we count 1, 2, 3. And then we look at the number after where we stop at. In this case, it's 5. So if the number is 5 and more, we add 1 to the previous one. So this will be 3.14. And when we add 1 to this will become 3.142. Alright, so let's look at some other examples. So you can pause the video and you can work it on your own. So we have the number 0.55555. We want to write this correct to 2 decimal places. So of course we count 2 numbers after the decimal point. So we count 1, 2, and then we look at the number after where we stop. We look at the digit after the digit where we stop. So this digit is 5. So we add 1 to the previous one. So this will be 0.56. So since we add 1 to the 5, that will become 6. So let's look at the last question. The question says, write 0.36489 correct to 3 decimal places. So in this case, we're talking about 3 decimal places, so we need 3 digits after the point. So we count 1, 2, 3, and then we look at the next number, which would be 8. So of course, 8 is 5 and more, so we add 1 to the previous one. So this would be 0.365 correct to 3 decimal places. Let me do one more example. Let's say I had the number 25.3214, and I want to write this correct to 2 decimal places. Of course, I count 2 digits after the decimal point, 1, 2. Then I look at the next number, which is 1. So of course, this is not 5 and more, so we leave it as it is. So this would be 25.32. And that is it for decimal places. Important thing, we start counting from the digit right of the decimal point, and then we look at the number after where we stop, and if it's 5 and more, you add 1. If it's 4 and less, you leave it as it is. Now let's look at significant figures. So for significant figures, unlike decimal places, we start counting from the first non-zero value, the first non-zero digit. Non-zero means any number other than 0. So you start counting from the first number that is not 0. So let's look at some examples. So let's say we wanted to round 0.009876 correct to 2 significant figures. So for this one, we cannot start counting from the 0. We have to start counting from the first non-zero digit. So the first non-zero digit would be 9. So we count 1, 2. And then we look at the digit after where we stop. So the digit after where we stop would be 7. So the same rule. So the thing about significant figures, the same rule as we apply to decimal place as relates to 5 and more and 4 and less, the same thing will apply for significant figures. The only difference is that we start counting from the first non-zero digit for significant figures. So we look at the 7. So we see the 7 is 5 and more. So we add 1 to the previous one. So this would be 0.0099. And this would be correct to 2 significant figures. So let's look at another example. We want to write 150,325 to 3 significant figures. So this one here may be a slight different because of one additional thing that we have to do. So let's look at this. So 3 significant figures, we start counting from the first non-zero. So we start count 1, 2, and we must include the 0 because we count every digit after the first non-zero, regardless if the digit is 0 or not, we have to include it. So this will be 1, 2, 3. And then we look at the number after where we stop. So the number after that is 3. So this is 4 and less, so we leave the rest as it is. So this will be 150,000. Now here's the thing. If we are to write back 325, then we did not round off anything. The whole purpose of rounding off is to make a number easier to write, easier to call. So we must do something to this 3, 2, and 5. Now, to finalize the whole rounding off, what we do, we just put 0 in place of all these digits. This would be 0, 0, 0. So 150,325, when we round it off correct to 3 significant figures, it will be 150,000. Because we are just concerned with the first 3 significant figures, and everything else we add 0 in place of it because we just concerned with 3 significant figures. So let's look at some more examples. So let's say we are asked to write 0.0003057 to 3 significant figures. So we start counting from the first non-zero digit. So we ignore all the zeros and we start from the 3 and we count 3. So 3 digits. So this will be 1, 2, 3. And then we look at the number after where we stop, which is 7. So we add 1 to the previous one, and this would be 0.000306. We add 1 to the 5, it will become 6. And this is correct to 3 significant figures. Let's look at the next one. We're asked to write 45,987 to 1 significant figure. So we just concern with 1 digit. So these are counting from the 4, so we just concern with the 4. And then we look at the number after where we stop at, which would be 5. So it's 5 and more, so we add 1 to the 4, so this will become 5. And of course, we add 0 in place of all the other numbers because we're just concerned with 1 significant figure. So this will become 50,000. So 45,987 to 1 significant figure would be 50,000. So let's look at the last example to close off this video. Let's say we have 67,890. We want to write this correct to 2 significant figures. So of course, these are counted from the first non-zero. So we count 1, 2. And then we look at the number after where we stop at, which would be 8. So we add 1 to the previous number. So this will become 68. And of course, we put 0 in place of all the other digits. So 67,890 correct to 2 significant figures will be 68,000. And with that, it has brought us to the end of this video. I trust that you now have a good understanding of place value, decimal places, and significant figures. So there are some key things I want you to remember. The value of the digit depends on where the digit falls in the number. When you are rounding off to decimal places, you start counting from the first digit after the decimal point. And of course, if the digit after where you stop at is 5 and more, you add 1. If it's 4 and less, you leave it as it is. And for significant figures, you start counting from the first non-zero digit. And let's say you're dealing with a whole number, for example, 5,332, and you want to round it off correct to two significant figures. You count 1, 1, 2, and then you look at the number after we restart it. And if it's 5 or more, you add 1 to the previous number. It's 4 and less, we know what we do. So this will become 5,300. So you put 0 in place of all the other non-significant values that we are not really concerned with. We're just concerned with two significant figures, so just two numbers we truly care about. Now, do not make the mistake when doing significant figures of forgetting to add 0 to these numbers. 5,332 cannot be the same as 53. The whole purpose of rounding off is not to change the value of a number, but it's to make it easier to write, easier to call. Many students make the mistake of leaving out the other digits. We cannot leave out the other digit because that will change the value of the whole number significantly. And we cannot do that when we are rounding off. The values must at least look the same when you're rounding off. You're just making it easier to write and easier to call. I'm emphasizing on that because many students make the mistake of leaving out these digits. So with that, it has brought us to the end of this video. I trust that you have a firm understanding of these concepts. I'll see you in the next one.